Evening eased down over the high desert the way a blanket slips from tired hands, and the light left a soft gold on the stone ribs of the land. Ada Crowe rode with one hand easy on the reins and the other resting on the horn, letting Hickory choose the gentle grade. The gelding had been uneasy all afternoon, ears flicking, ribs tight under the saddle like a fiddle string, asking not to be plucked. Ada wasn't in a hurry. The day had worn itself thin, and the wind had that hush that made a rider listen harder than talk. When the horse stopped without asking, she let him. Hickory's head turned, then turned again, as if memory tugged one way and scent tugged another. His breath came in quick puffs. A tremor worked through his shoulders. Ada slid a palm to his neck and felt the small tremble under warm hair. "All right," she murmured. "Show me." Sometimes a horse knew what a person didn't want to know. Hickory sidestepped toward a low ridge where the earth rose like a quiet word and then folded into a basin scattered with cholla and one tall saguaro watching everything. From the ridge she saw him, before she let herself admit the shape. A human form held upright at the foot of the giant cactus, back set square, hat tipped in the sand. The bones set neat, as a patient man who had chosen a chair that wouldn't move again. Boots, spurs, belt, the plain buckle catching last light. A long coat rested open like wings that had forgotten their lesson. Wind ran a hand along it and set a whisper loose. Hickory shied once, then planted, as if the fear had finished and the duty remained. Ada dismounted and looped the reins over her arm. The night would be full of coyotes if she lost him. Better to keep close. Sand gave under her boots the way a promise gives when it's been kept too long. She knelt an arm's length from the skeleton and let the first minute pass in respect. There are rules, even for those who carry no papers and answer to no one. The saguaro had taken its witness job serious. Its arms stood like a preacher's posture. This much is true, and this, and this. No vultures now. That kind of work had been finished years earlier. What remained was quiet. The right boot carried a cobbler's stamp small oval, impressed deep. F. Ortega Willow Creek. The left heel had a notch where the edge had once been mended with nail and stubbornness. The belt leather had dried into a question mark. In the coat's inside pocket, Ada found a tin flat, tobacco-styled with the lid dented in a way that meant someone had sat on it once and sworn softly after. Inside lay a folded paper and a short blue ribbon. The ribbon felt like a polite memory saved because it had touched a day worth saving. The paper carried a hand that tried for neatness and didn't always catch it. If you find me, I was waiting. If you find him first, tell Eliza I tried. No name under it. The pencil had faded. Below that, pressed faint, a grease thumbprint and a sketch of a saguaro with 3 arms, the center arm bent like an old elbow. Ada looked up at the real one and saw the likeness. "All right," she said softly. "I'm listening." The hat lay where the wind had set it, brim full of sand. Inside the crown, a stitched initial weighted S worked in with thread darker than the felt. The buckle wasn't fancy. A small nick on the lower edge suggested a scuffle that had ended badly for skin. Ada shifted, careful not to let shadow creep too far over the face without face. A coil of dried sinew held the coat together where the buttons had gone missing. She studied the ribs. One showed a round break, clean as a coin bite. Gunshot. Centered. Then time finished the rest. Hickory nudged her shoulder, breath damp with creosote. The gelding had scars of his own, white kisses of old wire, and one long line where a panicked night had taught both horse and rider the cost of rushing. He lowered his head toward the saguaro and snorted once, as if making a horse's sign of the cross. Ada tied a faded neckerchief to one cactus spine, small offering for a grave that never asked permission. The desert holds things because it can, not because it's kind. She had learned that the slow way, walking beside grief until it tired. She set a small fire against a stone outcropping and brewed coffee thin enough to be honest. The basin gathered night gently, star after star, arriving with the patience of family that never hurries the door. She spoke little, keeping company with the bones the way one keeps company with the old, not asking for stories, just leaving room for them if they rose. "Tell Eliza I tried." The name turned in her chest with a sound like a hinge finding itself. She wondered if Eliza knew her man had chosen a chair and not a bed to die in. Tracks? The desert remembers, until wind tells it to forget. On the basin's edge, Ada found the faint shadows of two horses, years gone. One light, one heavy. They had stood nose to tail. Then one had left south, the other north. Bootprints were a rumor at best. She followed the line of the heavy horse until it thinned into nothing, then studied the ground by the cactus again. A wagon tongue had once gouged the sand there. A small circle of stones told of cook fire old as her oldest scar. He hadn't been alone that last day. She ate jerky that had remembered better days and rolled her blanket near enough to the fire to hear its small talk. When sleep came, it came in pieces, the kind that fit together only after dawn. In the slivers between, she saw a woman's hand tying ribbon, blue like shade water, around a letter. A man trying a last smile he didn't believe. A saguaro settling into patience that had no end. Hickory shifted once, hooves scratching small music from the stones. Somewhere beyond, coyotes practiced their choir in a key that meant everything and nothing at once. Morning bled up from the east, clean and pale. Ada rose stiff and put coffee back into the world. She didn't like leaving anyone to the sky without something better than wind for company. A shallow scrape beside the cactus gave when she pressed the heel of her glove into it. Under 2 inches of sand, she found a badge-plain star, worn edges, back pin bent and stubborn, deputy worked into the center. The metal was cool still, like it had been thinking of shade. She set it on her palm and waited. Names sometimes climb out when invited. The badge had been polished often, once habit of a man who needed proof in his own hand. She held it near the ribs and listened, then tucked it into the tin with the ribbon and note. She wasn't ready to steal anything, but she wasn't ready to let the wind practice ownership either. The Ortega stamp on the boot gave her the first real line to pull. Willow Creek sat 2 days north if the horse had a mind to spare. Ada saddled Hickory and patted his neck. "We'll go see the cobbler," she told him. "Ask after an S." The ride out felt like slipping backward through someone else's thinking. Every mile gathered a little of him, how he'd held his shoulders, how he'd watched lines on the horizon until they made sense. By noon, the heat had grown unfriendly, and Hickory wanted water that didn't taste like the underside of a tin cup. At a shallow arroyo, Ada found a seep under Willow and let the horse teach his mouth to patience. She watered her hat and pressed it to her neck. The cold felt like a decision she'd been putting off. Eliza. S. Deputy. A ribbon tied with intention. Mid-afternoon brought a dust devil that walked the plain like it was late to a dance. Ada and Hickory waited it out behind a rock, watching the red scarf of it twist and flirt with dead grass until it lost interest and moved on. After, the air felt scrubbed. Far off, a line of cottonwoods traced a path to Willow Creek. Smoke rose from 2 chimneys, then flattened under a contrary breeze. Ada's mind walked ahead, boots on plank, bell on shop door, a woman or man looking up from leather with the tired patience of work done right or not at all. She arrived as the sky learned its mauve. F. Ortega was painted on a sign the sun had nearly eaten. Inside, the smell was leather, beeswax, and thyme. A woman looked up from a stitching awl. Her hair had gone white, in a way that suggested it had made up its own mind to do so. "Boots?" she asked. "Or apology?" Questions. Ada said. And kindness, if you've got some. End quote. Questions. Whirring laders. Questions. And kindness, if you've got some. Questions. And kindness, if you've got some. The woman nodded once, pulled a stool with her boot heel. Everyone's got a pair that doesn't fit, she said. Not unkind. Bring me the hurt, and I'll see. Ada set the right boot on the counter, heel turned to show the stamp. Yours? The woman ran a thumb along the sole, then traced the notch with one careful nail. Mine, she said. 15 no, 16 summers ago. For a lawman who wore weight like it was asking to be carried. Silas Hart, deputy, out of Raton Wash. He paid shy, not short. Said he'd be back for resoles. Didn't come. Ada heard the click of something in, not out. Do you know an Eliza? The woman's face softened into an ache religion would recognize. His wife, Eliza Hart. She left town, quiet. What happened? Ada asked. The all paused in air. Land paper got messy, Ortega said. Water rights. Fences moving after dark. A rancher with friends at the bank. Silas went to find proof. Folks said he found bullet instead. Body? No, Ortega said softly. Only talk. Ada set the tin on the counter and let the lid rest back in its place like a sigh. Ribbon, note, badge. The cobbler's hand trembled once, then steadied. He always did like blue, she whispered, not to Ada. Said it remembered the river for him. Eliza, Ortega said between stitches, had taught school until the walls turned thin from waiting. When the waiting broke, she folded her small life into half a trunk and went west where mail takes longer and gossip dies thirsty. She wore grief like she had borrowed it, Ortega said. Never let it own her, never gave it back. Ada felt the picture sit in her chest, polite and heavy. Where would proof be if proof were a man who hid? Windmill, Ortega said, eyes on thread. The big one out at Berryman's old spread. Silas liked heights. Said a secret breathes better up there. Night had found its full stride by the time Ada stepped back into it. She tied the blue ribbon to her canteen strap, not claiming, only remembering. Hickory tossed his head, eager for a mile that wasn't the one behind. We'll go to the windmill, Ada told him, and the desert made no argument. Behind her, the cobbler's lamp burned a small square on the road, then pinched out. Ahead lay a rancher's name that tasted like dull metal. The saguaro would keep its seat until she returned. She promised the bones without words that she would. Promises like that have gravity. Morning came with the kind of light that pretends to forgive. Ada and Hickory took the long line east, where Berryman's land lay threaded through with dry washes and fences that had learned to lean together like old men. The windmill rose before the house high, black against a pale sky, its veins still as a thinking hand. Wind hadn't found it yet. The ranch house squatted low, porch boards scuffed by boots that walked more than they worked. No smoke, no dogs. The kind of quiet that means either clean conscience or empty rooms. Ada's jaw set toward the second. She circled the house once, eyes touching, window, door, the line of the pump. Sand told her nothing she wanted, which was still more than most men told her. The windmill ladder rang when she put a boot on it, thin iron music that went up her bones and asked if they meant it. Stay, she said to Hickory, and the gelding's ears agreed in a language older than speech. The climb drew small sweat along her spine. 30 rungs, then the platform, where the world opened the way it does when an honest map finally lays down. From there she could see the line of cottonwoods marking the creek that had forgotten its job. The house roof showed its stubborn shingles. The horizon lay quiet as a kept secret. She set to work, fingers testing bolts, boards, the cross brace under the vane. The old carpenter who'd built this thing had liked to sign his work in small ways, an extra nail, a notch exactly where a man's hand would go looking. Under the platform lip she found a tin weight where none belonged, same shape as the others, but lighter. When she eased it free, sand fell like breath. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, a ledger, small but thick, and a folded map, drawn in a careful hand that had trusted patience more than talent. Names, dates, water lots, fence angles that moved half a boot in the night. Berryman's purchases all the way back to a spring that had no legal name but had quenched cattle without caring whose brand sizzled on their hide. And in the front of the ledger, 3 lines in a tighter script. If I don't come home, wind keeps what men steal. S. Hart. Ada let the quiet stand up beside her a moment. Down on the ground, Hickory's head came up sudden. Ada felt it in her spine before she heard the step, the kind of step that knows how to hide and still can't keep its own weight from telling on itself. She tucked ledger and map under her shirt, buttoned to collar, and adjusted her hat like a woman noticing weather. When she climbed slow. Berryman stood by the pump. When she reached the yard, hat brim low, smile thin as old leather, hand easy and wrong near his gun. Around him, 2 men arranged their faces into future alibis. Morning, Berryman said. Polite, like a snake. Something I can help you find from my roof? Wind, Ada said. And proof. He smiled wider. We're short on both. She glanced at the pump, at his boots dusted with a fresh, powdery crust that hadn't come from standing still. Funny, she murmured. I'm long. He worked his jaw like a man sampling meat. You're Ada Crowe. You ride for whoever's wrong on Friday and right on Sunday. I ride for the kind that keeps its word, she said. You ever met it? Berryman's eyes slid to the windmill, then back. You climbed a long way for a view of my land. I'd offer coffee if you'd started with a knock. Your door looks tired of hearing itself lie, Ada said. One of the men shifted his stance. Nervous horses talk with their feet. So do hired guns. Ada let her palm rest near her own holster, not touching. Silas Hart came out here once, she said. Looking for the shape your fences took after dark. He didn't come home. Lot of men don't, Berryman said softly. Desert's a fair widowmaker. Desert doesn't write ledgers, Ada said. That got him. A flicker, small as a blink, crossed his face and left the door open behind it. You'd best ride on, he said. Wrong kind of quiet. Maybe after I try your coffee, she answered, and moved toward the porch like someone who owned her shoes. Hickory's weight shifted behind her. His sign. She stepped once to the side without thinking. The first shot took splinters from the post where her shoulder had been. The second punched old wood where her hat would have lived if not for the horse. Hickory bolted, then checked himself, circling tight with a snort that said he'd seen worse and hadn't enjoyed it then either. Ada dove low and rolled under the porch lip where spiders had signed long leases. The 2 men split, boots drumming, one east, one west, trying to pinch. Berryman stayed middle bosses like that, kept the illusion of risk while letting other men measure it first. Ada breathed dust and splinters and her own patience. She waited until the east man's barrel flashed past the gap, then fired once. He fell without time to reconsider. On the west side, a boot scuffed, hesitated, then came faster. Ada slid toward the sound and put a bullet into the plank between her and his knee. Good wood tells truth. The scream said she'd guessed right. He dropped, cursing, gun skittering under the porch to lie beside her like a dog hoping to be adopted. The yard went quiet again, the kind that rings. Only Berryman breathed where a smart man would have folded. That ledger won't do you no good, he called. Word without a witness is just chatter. Ada smiled into the dark. I brought 2. She meant the windmill and the saguaro both. Certain things in the desert don't lie because they haven't learned speech beyond standing. Berryman stepped to the pump and put his hand on it the way a man touches a friend who understands more than it says. You think you can carry truth without getting cut? He asked. Truth's what bandages are for, Ada said, rolling out from under in a spray of dust. She came up into a squat and sighted the center of his wrongness. He looked back and saw in her what careful men rarely see someone who had chosen. He dropped his gun on the porch plank. The sound had a tired dignity to it, like an old hymn that knows it can't save anyone and sings anyway. Ada stood. The hired men groaned out their inventory of regrets. The wind found the vein and turned it once, twice, then left it alone. You'll bring law, Berryman said, almost pleased to have a script. I'll bring ledger, Ada said. Law can follow or not. He nodded slowly. Silas was a fool, he said. We all are, Ada answered. But some of us are useful fools. Hickory's breath made a long question mark before it blew away. Ada set the men in the shade and tied Berryman's wrists with a lead rope that had done better work. In the kitchen she found coffee that remembered beans and a loaf of bread that had lost that memory. She took water instead, filled the canteen, and let her hands rest flat on the counter a moment. 15 years ago, a man had climbed this windmill to leave his truth where altitude might preserve it. She tried to imagine his boots on these floorboards and found she could. Where's Eliza now? She asked without turning. Berryman made a sound with no shape. Gone west, he said. Married a store, I think. Or a town. She had that look. Which look? The one that makes a man feel small and grateful. Ada picked up the tinweight again and slid it into her saddlebag. She left a note on the table in a hand that had learned careful from deprivation. Ledger retrieved. Bring a wagon and a conscience. Then she walked the men toward the corral and remembered to thank Hickory. Some salvation is four-legged and plain. By mid-afternoon she had Berryman delivered to Willow Creek's tiny jail, where the iron bars took their job personally and the deputy took his coffee the same. She put the ledger in Maria Ortega's hands first. Some things require community to be true. The cobbler traced each entry with a fingernail and nodded like a pastor counting pews. People gathered the way people do, quiet first, then eager. Ada said less than a page and let the paper do its work. When the deputy finally took it, he held it as if it might break and swore without meanness. Silas Hart, he said, reading the front. I was a boy when he rode. Thought he was taller. Men shrink when they become stories, Ortega said. The truth puts the inches back. Ada asked after Eliza again, and a ranch wife with flour on her forearms said she'd heard of a schoolmarm in Marble Wells who wore a blue ribbon tied to her satchel. It was a thin lead, but thin leads woven enough times make rope. Ada slept that night in the livery loft, Hickory below breathing like a bellows, and dreamed of windmills that turned without wind. Marble Wells sat 2 days west. The path there stitched itself between red stone and scrub across a salt flat that made sound under hoof like quiet music for old people. Ada rode at a pace that kept thinking ahead of fatigue. Near sundown of the second day, she found the town dozing against a low hill. Children's voices tilted from behind a whitewashed schoolhouse. A woman wrote letters on a slate under the cottonwood. She wore a plain dress, the color of late rain, and a ribbon of faded blue near her wrist. When she looked up, Ada recognized resolve. Eliza Hart? Ada asked. The woman set down the chalk with the care of someone who treats small tools like friends. I was, she said, then smiled in a way that broke and mended the same moment. Now, I'm Eliza Wells. The town had the vacancy and I obliged. Ada told the story the way you tell a hymn you respect no flourishes, a pause where breath is a kind of prayer. Eliza's hands came together under her chin, then fell. When Ada put the badge on the table between them, Eliza touched it once and closed her eyes. He promised me he'd try, she whispered. They walked at dusk to the little rise beyond the school, where the land remembers everything out loud. Ada set the ribbon beside the badge and told Eliza about the cactus and the chair chosen at the end. He would have liked the view, Eliza said. Always did have a talent for standing where the wind could find him. What do you want, said? Ada asked. Eliza looked at the small pile metal cloth and the weight of years and smiled through it. Tell the saguaro thank you. Tell the wind we kept our promise. Tell him I made a life anyway. Ada rode back to Willow Creek slow, leaving the ledger's copies with those who shape truth into action. Preacher, deputy, cobbler, even the saloon where memory gets loud. Berryman would stand before a judge who could read columns as well as commandments. When she reached the basin of the saguaro, the evening light stood still to watch. Hickory stopped without being asked. Ada folded from the saddle and sat a while, hat on her knee, stars practicing in the east. She tied a longer piece of blue to the cactus and let the silence do the benediction. No one's ever truly gone, not while their story rides.